Assistant coaches and preseason games might not make for the most exciting news ever, but when they're the first ones in franchise history, that's a different story. What's cracking, everybody? My name's Scott, and yes, once again, we are back with some more Seattle Kraken news, which has definitely been picking up just as we expected, now less than 2 weeks away from the expansion draft. And once again, it is some more historic news with more franchise firsts. Granted, yes, that is kind of going to be the case with a lot of Kraken news over the next year, maybe even two, but doesn't mean we're not going to have fun with it. But before we get to that, we're going to start with our first piece of news in Charlotte, Carolina. Yes, once again, another Carolina tie to the Seattle Kraken, but this time it's actually with the Florida Panthers AHL affiliate, who will be the host team for at least 8 to 12 AHL players in Seattle's first season while they wait for their arena in Palm Springs to be built and starting their official AHL affiliate of their own in the 2022-23 season next year. Of course, we've known for a while that Seattle's yet to be named AHL affiliate, which we'll be calling the Palm Springs area home, had to push back their opening by a year, originally planned to open the same year as the Kraken, due to some issues with the location of where they were going to build their arena. Now that will be starting the 2022-23 season, so the Kraken had to find somewhere to put their AHL players for this first year. And up until a few days ago, the last that we had heard about this situation from Ron Francis was that they were working with one franchise and trying to keep most of, if not all of their players together for the first season in the AHL before their team starts up the following season. And now we know that that is the Charlotte Checkers, again, the affiliate of the Florida Panthers. Again, though, because it is just one team that will be sharing players from two different franchises, though, Seattle won't have a full AHL roster just out of the gate, and if they try to build past what sounds like 12 players, then they might have to send some of those extra guys other places, but at least for now, it sounds like Charlotte is the one and only plan. Of course, we do now also know that Seattle's AHL team won't be the only one starting off a little ways away from home while they wait for the finishing touches to be put on their arena. And that's because when it comes to the Kraken themselves, as they release their preseason schedule, because Climate Pledge Arena isn't set to be ready until October, they will be playing their 3 home games during that preseason schedule in the WHL arenas around Washington State, starting things off in Spokane. Yep, that's right. On September 26th, the Seattle Kraken will play their first ever preseason game in the Spokane Veterans Memorial Arena, the home of the Spokane Chiefs. Of course, this won't be the first time that top-level professional hockey will be played in Spokane, but it has been quite a while, over 100 years since the Spokane Canaries of the PCHA called the city home for 1 year. And although we still don't know what the regular season schedule is going to look like quite yet, or who the Kraken are going to be playing for their first official regular season game, largely because they're still trying to figure out what to do about the Olympics and potentially sending players this winter, of course, the first ever game that the Kraken will play against an opponent will be against the Vancouver Canucks. So, if you want to watch the first game of the Canucks versus Kraken, even if it is just a preseason game, and you're in Spokane or want to make that drive over there, then August 26th is your chance. After that, the Kraken will head north of the border to play in Edmonton and then Calgary, before returning to Everett to play their second home game on October 1st. When Everett's Angel of the Winds Arena, home of the Silvertips and the Seattle Kraken, will be playing host to the Edmonton Oilers. And then the very next day, on the 2nd, they'll head down just a little ways south of Seattle to Kent and the Showware Center, home of the Thunderbirds, in order to play their final home game of the preseason against the Calgary Flames, before finishing things up in Vancouver a couple of days later. Now, obviously, at least from a certain point of view, it's not ideal to be playing your first 3 home games as a franchise, even if they are preseason games, outside of your home city and home arena, but of course, Climate Pledge Arena does, as it looks right now, still need a little bit more time during that preseason to get the finishing touches on the arena so it can be ready for the regular season. Plus, as far as I'm concerned, even if these are going to be the first games and people are very excited to go see this team, I think that this is a really, really cool chance for the Kraken, and one that they're taking, to go have the team play in a few other cities around the state, even if 2 of them are pretty close to Seattle, to give some other communities that wouldn't otherwise necessarily want to make the trip to downtown Seattle to watch games a chance to see this team and spread that excitement a little bit more. Now, to a certain extent, I get the frustration of people in Seattle that have waited a very, very long time for this team and want to see them play their first couple of games. And, of course, playing in WHL arenas means that those are going to be quite a bit more limited-sized crowds. And being in Spokane for the first one, it's also somewhat limited by the travel time to get over there if you do want to see that very first game. But especially with preseason games, I think that this is a pretty cool thing that they're doing, and I would be honestly okay with them doing it going forward. Maybe even just playing one of their preseason games a year in Spokane. Granted, Kent and Everett are pretty close to Seattle, so I'm not sure how necessary it would be to go there particularly often, but still, I think it's a pretty cool thing that's happening this year, even if it isn't necessarily the way they would have planned it going in. And that brings us to the biggest piece of news from this last week. And of course, this one came out as I was editing the previous What's Kraken episode, and that was the hiring of the two assistant coaches in Jay Leach and Paul McFarland. Leach did play in part of 5 different seasons in the NHL, and although his NHL career wasn't particularly long, he did manage to be pretty well traveled during it, playing for 5 different teams in that span between the 2005-06 season and the 2010-11 season. Then, a few years later, in 2014, after retiring as a player, he got his coaching career started in the DEL German Pro League with Adler Mannheim, his old team. But although that year went particularly well, and maybe because it went particularly well with them winning that league's championship that year, it would be a one-and-done season for him as he would come back to North America in 2015 as an assistant coach for Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins of the AHL. And by December of that year, he was promoted to the interim head coach of that team, where he would finish off the season. But once again, it would be a one and done, as the very next season in 2016, he would move to Providence, where he would become an associate head coach of the Bruins there. And although it would take him a full year this time, he was once again quickly promoted to the role of head coach, this time a permanent role starting in the 2017-18 season, where he has remained for the last 4 seasons before being hired by the Kraken. In that time as head coach, putting together a record of 136, 77, and 26, and going to the playoffs in both of the years that they actually happened, with the last couple of years not having a playoffs for the AHL because of COVID. Now, granted, they did get knocked out of the playoffs in the first round of each of those first 2 seasons where they went to the playoffs, but this has still looked like a pretty good team over the last few years, even without playoffs in the last 2, and has looked very good under Leach's control, and he's definitely been a coach that a lot of people are excited about and looking at as an up-and-comer that would pretty quickly be getting a job in the NHL somewhere, especially with a lot of Bruins fans hoping that it would be with the Boston Bruins. But now we get to see what he can do in Seattle, and I'm definitely very excited for this hire and to see what he can do with the defense and penalty kill, which looks to be the strength of this team starting their first season. Meanwhile, on the other side of the bench, largely in charge of forwards and the power play, will be Paul McFarland. McFarland is coming over to Seattle from Kingston, where he was set to be the head coach and GM of the Frontenacs of the OHL this last season. And as somebody who doesn't follow the OHL too carefully, I do admit that I had to look up how to pronounce Frontenacs, so I hope I got that right. But McFarland obviously did not get a chance to do too much in that role, as the OHL season was cancelled last year because of COVID. Before that though, McFarland did actually get his coaching career started in the OHL back in 2012 as an assistant coach for the Oshawa Generals, where he remained for a couple of seasons until 2014. And then starting that following year in 2015, he was the head coach of those very same Kingston Frontenacs for a few years there. In the 3 years that he served as Kingston's head coach in that first stint there, McFarland brought the team to an accumulative record of 111, 71, and 22, so definitely a pretty respectable line as a head coach for that team, which is what earned him the job as an assistant head coach for the Florida Panthers in 2017. He'd end up spending 2 years in Florida with the Panthers, and although the Panthers would end up missing the playoffs in each of those seasons, which would lead to a coaching change that would also see him end up leaving the team, in both of the years that he was there, their offense did make steps forward and improved in their goals per game each season, and had noticeable improvements when it came to the power play, where their conversion percentage jumped 2% in his first season from where it had been the previous couple of years. And then in his second season with the team, they were second best in the league when it came to converting on a power play, with a 26.8% conversion rate. And although it's hard to argue too much with the moves that Florida has made over the last couple of years, with their on-ice product noticeably improving, especially this last season, which may be one of the best regular seasons they've had as a franchise, the one place they haven't improved over the last couple of years is the power play, which did show a noticeable decline in the first year without McFarland. And his contributions in Florida definitely didn't seem to go unnoticed across the rest of the league, because the very next year he would find another similar job as an assistant head coach, this time in Toronto with the Maple Leafs. Now, granted, this is a Maple Leafs team that has a strong young forward core that can definitely put up some points, at least in the regular season anyway. So it's hard to say exactly how much he helped improve them, but he certainly at least kept them going in the same upward direction that they had been going the previous couple of years. And when it came to the power play, he definitely seemed to have an impact there, improving their conversion percentage on that power play by nearly 1.5%. And this last season, after McFarland and his co-assistant head coach Dave Haxtell, who you may have heard of at this point, were let go by the team, let's just say the Maple Leafs definitely didn't improve on the power play this last year. Of course, it's pretty safe to say that McFarland's shared time in Toronto with Haxtell as co-assistant head coaches of that Maple Leafs team for 1 year probably played a role in what got him the job here in Seattle, but he also definitely has a resume that shows that he's more than capable of doing a good job in the role that he's been given with the Kraken. That being said, as we've talked about, he'll probably have his work cut out when it comes to this particular forward core and power play that he'll have to salvage something out of, as this team probably won't have one of the best forward cores of any team in the NHL, at least for the first season or two. But at least he does have some experience in helping to turn around or jumpstart a underperforming offense with his time in Florida, and definitely has a little bit more variety of experience with that extra time with a much better offense in Toronto. So he should be able to at least bring that experience to Seattle and do probably as good a job as anybody could. It'll definitely be one of the more interesting parts of this team to watch, though, as he and the rest of this coaching staff are definitely going to have to figure out how to get some things out of a few of these players on the forward end that they may or may not have shown that they have up until this point in their career, if the Kraken want to put up enough points over the course of the season to be as competitive as we hope they can be. Overall then, with both of these hires, personally, I'd say that I'm feeling pretty optimistic and feel pretty good about both of them. The defensive end, again, should be the stronger part of this team, and there they went with a coach that's a little bit on the younger side as far as coaching is concerned in the NHL, but is an up-and-comer that could definitely shine with a strong defensive core. On the forward end, it's a little bit of a different story of what you'll have to work with, but they have a guy with quite a bit more experience and a decent amount of experience working with Haxtell as the head coach, so that will definitely help this group come together and hopefully get the most out of this Kraken team in their first season. But I'd love to know what you guys think of both of these hirings and this coaching staff as a whole. I mean, I know Leach in particular, who was the first one announced, seemed to be pretty popular, but again, this is going to be an interesting first season that none of these guys have really had any experience with anything quite like bringing a team together for the first time. On top of that, I'd love to hear what you think about the preseason schedule and just the general excitement for this team having their first games on their calendar. But with that, we have reached the end of this one. So any news that has come out as I'm recording this or editing it, we'll just save for next time because I'm sure that's already out there. Otherwise, if you've made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below. Until next time, stay safe out there and be good to each other. Peace.